feet from authentic lamas, and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths, and thus swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. Sorry, skip that one. Okay, let's just do the 4 limitless contemplation. Okay, which is a very important thing, these 4. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Senjen damje dewatang dewe jutang den pajutik, dungal tang chitutang trawajutik, Dungal mepe dewa tampatang minra wajutik, nearing chaktang nitang trawe tangnum chempo lane pajutik. So tonight, we're carrying on with what we did. And please, if you haven't watched part 1 and 2, watch, because I'm going to go on with them a few more parts, because so much has come to me that I need to share with you, that I really want the subject to be very well done. And so I've called it tonight, Using Buddhist Practice to Establish a New View of Our Neurotic Fixations, Traumas, etc. So this is part 3 that we're doing tonight. What I want to say to all of you, there's Eugene, he told me he was coming. What I want to say to all of you is that, you know, I feel very strongly that this subject is so important, because all the people that I am meeting, discussing, texting me, it really seems to be that there is, hello Eugene, that there is, it's lovely to see you, that there is something here that is truly, truly, truly tripping us up in our Buddhist practice, okay? And I know that actually what is tripping us up in our Buddhist practice is actually our psychology, all the things that are in the psyche, our neuroses, our fixations, our pride, but everything that we have, our traumas, our woundedness. And a lot of people are talking to me now about it. And it's very interesting, because a few people who are quite far on the Buddhist path say to me, there isn't enough written and talked about on this subject. There are a couple of people that do it, but it's almost as though when you come to Buddhism, you're supposed to just leave all of the things behind, as our lamas do. Leave all your neuroses, leave all your fixations, leave everything. And it doesn't happen. And you can see it, that people don't have success in the practice because of their stuff, because their psychological stuff is intervening all the time, and because they can't go beyond. And a lot of people, as I was talking about in the last 2 weeks, split off a part of them or repress that and think they can build this whole new life on top of it, but it doesn't work that way. So I'm going to start with 2 stories tonight, short one and a longer one. A student of a wise sage once complained to the master that he'd not achieved the spiritual level and totality of devotion to which he had aspired. What can I do for you, my son? The sage asked. He says, I've thus far been unable to find the key to your heart. The key, the student cried out in anguish. Who needs a key? Use an axe to open my heart if you have to. No need, the sage replied. Your heart has just opened. Okay, so it's a very important thing that we have that extreme motivation to actually find what we are looking for. It's really important that we do and that we actually open up. But lots of times, and I'm going to throw it open when I've given you a little bit more, because I want to give you one very special teaching that I came across, but I'm going to open it up and I want you to share. I don't care how limited your view is. I want you to ask and share, because it's so important for me that you work through your own rubbish, your own stuff that you've got. So this story by Rachel Remen was called The Container, okay? She said like this: one of the angriest people I've ever worked with was a young man with osteogenic sarcoma of the right leg. He had been a high school and college athlete, and until the time of his diagnosis, his life had really been good. Beautiful woman, fast cars, personal recognition. 2 weeks after his diagnosis, they had removed his right leg above the knee. The surgery, which saved his life, also ended his life. Playing ball was a thing of the past. These days, there are many sorts of self-destructive behaviors open to an angry man like this. He refused to return to school. He began to drink heavily, use drugs, alienate his former admirers and friends, and have one automobile accident after the other. After the second of these, his former coach called and referred him to me. He was a powerfully built and handsome young man, profoundly self-orientated and isolated. And at the beginning, he had that sort of rage that felt very familiar to me. Filled with a sense of injustice and self-pity, he hated all the well people. In our second meeting, hoping to encourage him to show his feelings, I gave him a drawing pad and asked him to draw a picture of his body. He drew a crude sketch of a vase, just an outline. Running through the center of it, he drew a deep crack, and he went over and over the crack with a black crayon, gritting his teeth and ripping the paper. He had tears in his eyes. They were tears of rage. It seemed to me the drawing was a powerful statement of his pain and his finality of the loss. It was clear that this broken vase could never again hold water, could never function as a vase again. It hurt to watch. After he left, I folded the picture up and saved it. It seemed too important to throw away. In time, his anger began to change in subtle ways. He began one session, still anger, because one of our neuroses is anger, by handing me an item torn from our local newspaper. It was an article about a motorcycle accident in which a young man had lost his legs. Anyway, he looked up, he said, "These idiots, these doctors don't know the first thing about it." And then he went through article after article, week after week, destroying whatever the doctors were doing, saying they didn't know anything. And all his reactions were a harsh judgment of the well-meaning effort of doctors and parents, and that nobody could understand. Anyway, people came to our teaching hospital from all over the world, and the chances were good that I said to him it was quite possible, if he wanted to, I could let him visit some young people who'd also been through terrible things. So within a few weeks, he began to visit young people on the surgical wards whose problems were similar to his own. And he came back full of stories, delighted that he could reach these young people, and he was often able to help when no doctors or anyone else could help. After a while, he felt able to speak to parents and families, helping them better to understand and to know what was needed. The surgeons, delighted with the results of these visits, referred more and more people to him, and gradually his anger faded and he developed a sort of ministry. I just watched and listened and appreciated. My favorite of all his stories was a young woman who had a tragic family history. Breast cancer claimed the lives of her mother, her sister, and her cousin. Another sister was in chemotherapy, and the last event had driven her into action. At 21, she took one of the only options open and had both her breasts removed surgically. He visited her on a hot midsummer day wearing shorts, his artificial leg in full view. Deeply depressed, she lay in bed with her eyes closed, refusing to look at him. He tried everything he knew to reach her, but without success. He said things to her that only another person with an altered body would dare to say. He made jokes. He even got angry. She did not respond. All the while, a radio was softly playing some rock music. And what he did, frustrated, he finally stood up and in a last effort to get her attention, he unstrapped the harness of his artificial leg and let it drop to the floor with a loud thump. And she opened her eyes and saw him for the first time, and encouraged, he began to hop around the room, snapping his fingers in time to the music and laughing out loud. After a moment, she burst out laughing too. Fella, she said, if you can dance, maybe I can sing. This young woman became his friend and began to visit people in the hospital with him. She was in school and she encouraged him to return to school and study psychology and dream of carrying his work further. Eventually, she became his wife, a very different sort of person from the models and cheerleaders that he dated in the past. And in our final meeting, we were reviewing the way he had come, the sticking points and the turning points. And what I did, says Dr. Rehrman, is I took out the picture of his broken vase that he'd done with the black crayon. And unfolding it, I asked him if he remembered the drawing that he'd made of his body. He took it in his hands and looked at it for some time. You know, he said, this drawing isn't really finished. Surprised, I extended my basket of crayons to him. Taking a yellow crayon, he began to draw lines radiating from the crack in the vase to the very edge of the paper. Thick yellow lines. I watched puzzled. He was smiling. Finally, he put his finger on the crack, looked at me and said softly, this is where the light comes through. So I think it's a really beautiful story. You know, a typical story of some people who've really used their neuroses, their psychoses, their illnesses to really help. But why I use this story is it helps us to understand the relative karma, okay, which can be real trauma and why it's there, even apart from the fact that our karma was created by ourselves. When we go deeper and beyond it, we can see how amazing this is to bring us to the true nature of reality, our Buddha nature. This is the work we were meant to do, the spontaneous, perfective, action-accomplishing wisdom, which we might never have gotten to. Now, I know literally hundreds of bereft people, lots that have been through my own hands over all the years, who come to their true work and their true meaning because of the bereavement and despite all the trauma that they've been through. So relatively, trauma can catapult us into our true mission. Ultimately, it doesn't even exist per se. Now, this is such an important thing because all of us have got our wounds, our trauma, our neuroses, our psychoses, sometimes even worse, our scars, our terrible backgrounds, our perversions of our parents. We've all got those kind of things, okay? But ultimately, these things do not exist per se. In other words, yes, there is something there, but it is interdependent causes, cause and effect, interdependent causes. There has to be a cause over why you are going through this terrible thing, why you go through a young death of a parent, why you lose a child, why you do all these kind of things. There are always causes that come into effect. And what happens is, if those causes weren't there, you wouldn't go through this. But when you go to an ultimate view in Buddhism, you really realize that you are in the right place at the right time. And ultimately, these things don't exist per se. Now, Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche, in talking about this beautiful teaching in Samantabhadra, which is all about Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva, is all about aspiration. And he says the aspiration is what you are looking at. And he keeps on talking about this dream, that this person has this dream and they're falling and they need to be rescued, but they're in the dream and they're screaming maybe, or they're shouting, but then they wake up and they say, oh, it's a dream. And then everything falls away. We can't seem to say it about the things we go through, because it's a dream when you're dreaming it in the sleep state, and it's a dream when you're awake in the living state. Both are just temporary, transient dreams made up of interdependent causes. As soon as you are seeing that as duality, this is me, I'm an orphan, I'm an abandoned child, I'm a rape victim, I've had this terrible divorce, I'm a this, I'm a that. No, you're not. That is when you are looking at it dualistically, okay? But not when you are looking at it with the true nature. Then it's just a temporary, transient drama. And we've got to actually see what triggers us back into that drama, as though that drama were for good. We've got to see what triggers us into that, which is so important, because once we know the trigger, we don't have to respond like that. A lot of people say to me, but Melanie, I just can't help myself. I can't help myself. This is how I respond when I'm in a social situation. This is how I respond when somebody's nasty to me. This is how I respond when I think somebody's going to ditch me. When I think somebody's going to ditch me, I start going back into that same neurosis. Now, when does the wake up occur? And I want to give you this very important teaching, and I want you, while you're still fresh, to listen very, very carefully, because it's an unbelievable Buddhist teaching. And I'm hoping from it you would be able to understand this much, much better. Now, it comes from a book by Kennard Lipman called The Secret Teachings of Padmasambhava, okay? And it comes from a lineage called the Kandro Nyingtik, which means the innermost essence of the dakinis. And I want you to listen carefully, because this innermost essence, the dakinis only bring complete and total truth. And it's usually found in a terma. And what this whole little teaching is about is the essential instruction on mastering the energies of this life, okay? Our neuroses, our traumas, our scars, our wounds are all made up of the wind energies. So if we master the wind energies, which Padmasambhava gives us a lot of ways to do that, so do those traumas no longer have an ability to move in the negative columns of your body. They will come together where you understand this me and this outside trauma are actually one. And there is no such a thing as me, the victim, with that trauma. And you go to another state where it doesn't happen. Now I'm going to read you 2 pages of this teaching, and I want you to really concentrate if you can, because it goes like this. In the Tibetan tradition, Dzogchen means the understanding of a total completeness, the primordial wholeness of a person. Now, this teaching is right at the top of the teaching, and it doesn't matter if you never do it, no problem. But just to understand the principle of this teaching is the best way to really deal with all our psychology. According to this perspective, this wholeness is present right from the very beginning. So from the day you're born, right before that, all along, this completeness, this wholeness is already present from wherever we make a start. At first, he says, this wholeness, this completeness sounds very abstract, maybe philosophical. I've got to say to you that Zongsa, one guy got up at this particular talk and said, Rinpoche, I'm a philosopher. And he then proceeded to give all this philosophy, beautiful stuff, but all this philosophy. He said, so if I'm on a Buddhist path, should I give up my philosophy? And you know what he answered? Yes. Nothing else. Yes, because I thought that was so funny. He didn't even say, well, you can keep this. He just said, yes, give it up. Why? Because the philosophy keeps covering over this essential wholeness that just is. It's not something we're going to develop. And it sounds very abstract and philosophical, like you've been through some long, complex process and now you come out whole. A key to unlocking this seeming paradox is that the goal is present in the beginning. How do we know the goal is present? We look directly to our experience in order to recognize that some kind of motivation already exists. From the point of view of Dzogchen, the whole teaching, its basis, path, and goal can be understood by looking into our motivation. Now, he says, all the Buddhist schools talk about motivation, bodhicitta. He says the Mahayana tradition, for example, emphasized the motivation. You must go and say, my motivation is to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings. That's our motivation, he says. Okay, but in that case, the motivation is a basis for setting out on your path. But Dzogchen is said to be a direct rather than a gradual path. Now, I'm telling you this little thing because some of you might get this. And if you get this, I cannot tell you what a difference it'll make to your life. So in Dzogchen, the motivation is not the starting point to go on the path or to do something else. The starting point is not separate from the path or the goal. It's all the same. It's all wholeness, wholeness, wholeness. So what do we mean then by motivation in Dzogchen? Motivation or bodhicitta is just another name for Dzogchen, the total completeness of one's being, which is present right now. We are complete. We are perfect. What we're doing in our lives, what's going on in our lives may not be perfect. It's only relative, but we are perfect. That's what it starts from. Okay, so more precisely, the motivation here refers to the aspect of one's complete being. Now listen carefully, which is the ability to know itself. It refers to the pure fact of being aware, our capacity and desire to know. Okay? We experience this basic knowing as a desire to understand the world and ourselves. I just want to understand the world and myself and really, really be able to serve in that way. Motivation is always there, working, shedding light, making conscious, mirroring the whole universe, overcoming boundaries to the unknown. So I'm going to give you this sentence. Do not forget this sentence. Knowing wants to know. Knowing wants to know. Just ponder that for a minute. Knowing wants to know. And it is this intention to know. And the practice of Dzogchen is to experience and be this knowing. Now, how do you be this knowing? In what way can you become this knowing? This motivation, this desire to know goes way beyond your curiosity, okay? It is wholeness, desiring to know, to mirror itself. It wants to know, what is all this about? If I'm complete, then what is all this pain about? As the Buddha said, when Shariputra said, hey, Buddha, if you're in the world, why is the world in such a mess? And the Buddha said, if you can't see the purity of the world, it's not my fault. Because what you see is what you think you know. But here, he's saying, knowing wants to know. It is wholeness desiring to know, to mirror itself, okay? It's the summit. It's not a practical path. You can't put it into practice, but it needs to be transmitted to you in order to wake up or point out this primordial knowing in person. That's called when a master gives you a direct introduction. What is this pointing out introduction? It's when the master actually says to you, hey, you are perfect. What's going on down there, what you've done is all relative, but you, in your nature, are perfect. And when you get this pointed out, you suddenly think, why am I picking up all this crap all the time? Why am I going back to it? It's over. Why can't I get over the fact that this particular thing is over? This relationship is over. Why can't I get over the fact that my parents abused me and I still feel terribly scared of anyone else in the world abusing me? Because what they're saying is, from the point of view of knowing, there is none of that. That's really hard for people because people can't understand that because they're going through it. But this direct introduction, what is it? It's like seeing all of one's being in a mirror and understanding that one's own awareness is just a mirror. It's mirror. That's all. What we are seeing in the world is just a mirror of our perception. So when we've got an ego, this is me, I must protect myself, I need more, I need you to do this, I need you to love me, I need you to give me more, I need you to be next to me. It clashes with that, this knowing, this mirror that is the direct, pristine awareness that we have, merely mirrors everything. It's not true. It's all a dream. It's just a mirror, okay? And we identify with what the mirror reveals. So if my mirror reveals an angry person, I'm ready for a fight. I can't stand back and say, but it's just a reflection, a projection from the mirror of my awareness. Now, what I just want to say, one or two more things about this, and then I'll leave it. If you don't get it, drop it. I'm coming back to very simple thing. It's very simple. But for those of you that can get it, it is the most wonderful way of getting through your life. Because you know that this life is being lived out by a temporary transient person, that all your traumas, why you had a mother that couldn't understand you, why you had a father that raped you, why you had a trauma, why you were in this war, why you happened to be in this place, all of that was just perfect to clean the relative karma that you had created. but none of it is really you. It's just that temporary drama that James Lowe talks about. But we identify with what is out there, all that we cannot accept and we cannot understand in ourselves. We can't be whole. So we struggle. I'm coming to your questions now. We struggle. We struggle. We really strategize. We defend. Why are we doing that? This knowingness reveals the obstacles in their full realization. So the obstacles are also revealed in their full realization if we just wait. So Namka Norbu said, observe yourself to discover how you are limited and conditioned, trapped in the cage of dualism like a little bird. So as soon as we understand this, we stand out, we see whatever trauma we've got, okay, and we don't see it out there. We just see that as the temporary reflection in the mirror that we are going through. It's really important for all of you to understand that. And when you do shamatha, calm abiding, and you calm your mind, then when you do vipassana, it's insight into the reality, into the nature of reality. That's what it is. To truly know one's obstacles is to no longer have obstacles. They're gone. It's actually incredible. So I'm going to just do one little example that he gives, which is really beautiful to understand, and then we'll go on to the rest. But if you can even get a little inkling of understanding from this, and I hope all the people that are doing Passover will be able to listen. I just want to give you his example. So he gives an example of where you're working with an emotion, where the energy of anger, so you're angry, concentrates in the heart, and like a fire, it spreads out of control, leading to angry concepts and actions, sometimes even killing a person, as we see in the world when this anger is out of control. The energy of the anger is itself this mirror-like pristine awareness. That is, we don't like, or we are averse to a person in the environment because we have projected onto this person what we have rejected in ourselves. Can I say that again? We have projected onto this angry person what we have not rejected in ourselves. We've put it onto them. And now they're playing out in the drama of your life. It's a very interesting thing. The object then acts as an irritating mirror, showing us what we don't want to see in ourselves. You know, when we're angry with someone and we start shouting and we start screaming and we start being very ugly within our own selves, and we're really quite cross about this, okay? And it says if we directly experience this mirroring function itself, rather than just its effects as angry concepts and actions, then we may feel this energy of anger. It's not projected and it doesn't become a source of irritation, and we can keep it in the heart. We can see what it really is. Very difficult, but very simple. So all our rubbish in the world are our own projections, okay? If someone comes into the room and they are authoritative, and we've got a hang up about authoritative people, we just project onto them the things that we can't accept in ourselves, and then they become an authoritative, demeaning person. Okay, I'm throwing it open. Maybe you want to say something. Anybody? It's a very beautiful teaching, quite difficult. We'll go on to much more simple teaching. But I just want you to know that there's a place to go where you are whole and complete. It's within us. And we really need to know this and see this. Anyone want to ask or say?
Yeah, Ma, I just love what you said about the term Dzogchen just being another word to describe being in the moment.
Exactly, yeah. Be,
And
more than being in the moment, you can be in the moment without awareness.
yes,
This is so important what you're saying, because being in the moment with awareness
with
is what
awareness.
you want to do. So you're in the moment, because a lot of people are in the moment, but they are repressing and splitting lots of
Mm,
things in their being. So they're
yes,
not fully present, and
yes,
they're still making concepts while they are about the future and about the past. That's not
yes.
exactly what you're saying, but with awareness.
But w while we're still humans, we're not at the level where Lama Yeshe and Akong Rinpoche and the Karmapa are. We're still going to have these levels of ego,
Yeah,
and we're
we have
still going to be clashing. We're still going to have this clash going on the whole time of this Buddha nature, Rigpa, and our relative thinking mind.
absolutely until we give it up.
How do
Until,
how do
until
we give?
Well, you see, the Nondra practice, the
Yes,
preliminary practice, help you a lot to give that up. But I find it's not only the practice, but I do find, and I've got to say this to all of you, and we'll come to Rob Priest's stuff on that. I don't care if we take 2 more sessions, as long as we really get it, all of us. But you know what? The practice, a lot of people do not do regular practice. Okay. Yeah,
yeah,
today I can't. I'm a little bit busy.
mm,
I'm short for time. I can't manage today. I've got a big business meeting. I've got this, I've got that, I've got the other. A lot of people are not able to do regular practice. Now, for me, that practice is where the dawning happens on me, because a lot of my practice, a lot of my practice is contemplating and realizing things. So often I'm reading a prayer and I just drop the whole prayer and I'm looking at the meaning that I haven't seen. I've been saying that prayer for, who knows how many years, and I've just seen what they're saying. Like the one day I was sitting and I read the sentence, may illumination dawn as wisdom. Now, you know how many
mm,
times I've read that sentence, but on that day, I read it with awareness in the moment, and I thought, that's it. The illumination comes from the essence, and if it dawns as wisdom, then you know what the world is all about, and you know what all your struggles are about, and you know what everything is about. It's knowing that you know. So knowing wants to know. When you know these things, then you're free. They just dissolve. Now you
mm,
see, if people don't do regular practice, they don't have that opportunity to actually, like I was telling them in the dream group yesterday, when I read my retreat notes and my dreams and my experiences in retreat, they happen all the time. Eventually, at the end of a retreat, I was telling them yesterday, I don't know if I dreamt this or it actually happened. I really don't know anymore, because you begin to actually realize the dream-like nature. Now, figure out how, if you do realize the dream-like nature of your life, how little it impacts you. Because you all know when you wake up from a nightmare, you say, "Phew, I'm so relieved that was a dream." But we don't know this life is a dream. We don't know. Knowing wants to know. It's very interesting. Eugene, you're nodding your head. We've missed all your wisdom, Eugene. Okay, we're waiting for your wisdom. Maybe by now you're enlightened. You've gone and done all your training.
That's high expectations, but um so with the knowing, wanting to know, I think it's because I think you're talking there about the primordial wisdom, because like there's a part of you that wants to return to source and like reach that level of enlightenment, but we're so stuck in our ego and our identity and our
Exactly.
clinging that we simply can't get there. So sometimes you do need a good club to kind of like question your current identity,
Good.
to kind of like say, is this really my life? You know, is this really everything that I am? Is this really? So it's, and that's why, like you said it as well, like when you were saying about like why was the parents abusive or why did the children die or that kind of stuff, it's interesting because like if you look at it from a relative level, you get stuck in, oh my god, it's awful, and you see the grotesqueness of it, and you see people like hurting each other and that kind of stuff. But at an ultimate level, it's all energy. It's not even a physical form, it's all just energy playing out. So
Exactly. Yes.
it's not a form, it's not a person, it's just the karma is coming to fruition and it's changing over. On a
Yeah.
relative level, we have the ego, the I, and a sense of right and wrong and what is good and bad and all of that kind of and what's pretty and what's ugly. And so then we have the emotional reactions from an identity perspective. But if you look at it from a pure energy level, like you can't see it. I think it's like what Bette Midler sang, from a distance. You know, like from a distance, everything is right. But I think if you're up close, it's hard because you're stuck in it.
You stuck in, but you see, when you develop that ability to be in that view, which is a very high view, you're able to be there right there. It's okay because you don't feel so bad about whatever's happening. You know that this is just the
Yeah.
right place, the right time, what you need just to clear everything so you can be
Yeah.
a fully
So, so it's probably what Akong Rinpoche kind of knew when he already
person.
kind of had an idea that something would happen to him, because he's like, oh well, this will happen, but if I look at it at an ultimate level, this will happen. I'll get reincarnated. That guy will clear his karmic energy. I will give Lama Yeshe a chance to take leadership. Like so, he probably like so. It's a very different view, eh?
Very different. But you see, what I want you to understand is that Rob Priest talks about how these lamas do not really understand our psychology
No.
because they haven't been brought up like that. Sometimes when they've been working in the West for a long time, like they have now, they get a real inkling into, they still think we're peculiar in many ways, you know, why we haven't actually got it yet. But the bottom line is that they really, really, really don't get us. And he said he felt this need to bring the psychology and the Buddhism together so that we really, really, really could move on and so that we really could see. And he said, one of my greatest challenges as practicing Tibetan Buddhist of some 30 years has been to reconcile two worldviews, namely those of Buddhism and those of Carl Jung. He was a Jung follower, and that's very interesting because
Mm,
I was a great Jung follower.
yeah.
Okay. And sort of when I came to Buddhism, I mean, I realized long before that Jung had a great depth of understanding. I mean, he wrote the introduction to the Tibetan Book of Dying. You know, he wrote the introduction, Jung. He definitely did. But this Rob Priest wanted to bring together the psychology and the Buddhism so that they could come. He said, finding that both approaches offered something very important in understanding my life, I've never felt the desire to abandon one for the sake of the other. As a consequence, I needed to bring these two views together. He said, when I encountered the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, I found that it could offer a path to me that could be followed, a clear and systematic method of self-transformation. Okay, when I later trained as a psychotherapist, I became increasingly aware that we are constantly passing through a psychological process, something that Jung also recognized when he did alchemy. Because, you know, in Jung's alchemy, you know, alchemy was a science where I think all of you know, they took all the base metals, they melted them down to what they called the negredo, the black, and then they added things until you formed the perfect gold. And now Jung used that as a psychological process, the alchemy, that you melt down to the negredo, and then from the negredo, you build up. Now, you see, in Buddhism, they don't really give you a chance to melt into the dark because they're already saying, well, you're perfect, and here are the practices, clean it up, and then you'll be able to be there. But when you actually understand the psychology of the alchemy, it's really necessary because our dark sides are what intervenes all the time, both in our practice and in our relationships. Can you all understand that?
Yeah.
That if you do not know that dark side, if you do not understand your shadow side that Jung talked about, then it interferes all the time and you land up doing the same old stuff all the time. We keep going back to it. So it's really important that we are able to do that. And he says the classical Buddhist teachings, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, define a path on which experience and insights evolve as we engage in specific practices. He said there's a wealth of methods to try and get it. And he says many of us look for a clear and concise way to cultivate the mind and free ourselves from needless confusion and suffering. He says, while the Buddhist teachings offer a means of resolving our life issues, they have less to say about the subjective experience of that path and what its psychological effects may be. The insight or experiences we might gain emerging through a psychological process that is different for each of us. And he says most of the lamas that he's worked with are reluctant to speak about their inner process. So let's ask the question, what happens if you've got a dark side? Because Rob Priest had this one student or this one co-worker, co-person that he had in Buddhism, who was the most amazing Buddhist practitioner, amazing, but he actually had a drug problem. And he kind of overcame his drug problem by doing all his Buddhist practices and all the rubbish that he had. But in the end, he died of an overdose, and nobody in the groups that they went to even knew that he was taking drugs anymore. So in other words, he had a dark shadow side, and he couldn't reconcile the shadow side, because as soon as he came to the Buddhism, he kind of thought that the Buddhism says, be a good person, practice virtue, do kind things to people, don't do harm to people. Now, a lot of people absorb that without looking at their own shadow side. Sometimes the part of us that wants to retaliate, sometimes the part of us that doesn't feel good at particular time, that wants to put a little dig or have a little gossip or whatever we happen to be doing at that particular time. Now, if that's where the knowing needs to know. Because if we know that we've got this dark side, like, for instance, my husband sitting there will say, she's such a cheeky thing. You know, she's cheeky. She's got a cheek. Now, I realize that, you know, being cheeky or being a cheeky person and defying what someone else is saying is a really dark part. And you need to be in control of it. So when it wants to come up, you need to see, what is it reacting to? What has this person done that I feel I need to be in control of this situation or give a cheeky response or whatever the case is? We have to be aware of our own dark sides. Say, for instance, we don't like people to know us very deeply emotionally. So we cut off and we use our intellect for everything. We have to know why we do it. We have to know why we use that. Yes, Mart, please.
Well, I think I'm getting some of it, but I'm not getting all of it. So, and I wonder also, I mean, I think it's maybe a matter of a possible integration, but not necessarily, and it's not so black and white, because I mean, in Buddhism, you also have the defending your demons based on the chur practice. You know, you have Tara Rokpa going back into your pre. You know, it's not called psychology, but there are practices and exercises or whatever you want to call it, that I suppose could do the same thing. Yeah, I'm not 100% yet there to say, well, you know, we need the Western psychology. I mean, and I'm not. I think that there's beautiful things in it, but I don't know if. Well,
are you saying you don't know whether you need the psychological approach of Buddhism, or you don't know whether you?
I think Buddhism. It feels to me that Buddhism has got what is needed.
Well, I think that Akong Rinpoche developed the Tara Rokpa therapy, which is not all over. You don't find it all over. I think that was its development based on seeing that people were psychologically a mess, and that with their messy backgrounds, they couldn't really do the practice because you can't understand what the practice is. You can't get to it. So I think that he brought that in. I think that's a special thing, the Rokpa therapy, because I think he really was trying to say people with all their psychology can't do the practices. I mean, and I think it really is true, because I can see people can't do the practices. And lots of people don't practice. Lots of people come to lectures, read books, you know, do a few mantras, but they don't do any practice. Now, the practice is orientated, especially the Nondra, the foundational practices. The Nondra is actually based on working through all your psychology and getting you to surrender all that negative transient stuff and getting you to really surrender it. But people don't understand it. Now, I watch people in retreat doing that Nondra practice, and things start happening because the actual prostrations, the actual Vajrasattva practice, the actual things that you do in the Nondra work right into the energy winds. Now, remember, going back, the energy winds are where you carry your psychology. Only the energy winds come into the central column is the psychology done. It's over. The karmic imprints are over. But we carry it. So when you do prostrations, for example, they work into the energy winds. And then if people have not resolve their anger, their pain, their suffering, their bereavements, their everything, they go absolutely mad. They really, really, really feel angry. It brings it all up. You see, but
Yeah.
with Tibetans and everything, they don't have the same, they really, really don't have the same, they don't have the same, like I started off this series by showing you that their background was very conducive to wholeness and nature. And if your mother wasn't there, your auntie was there, you know, other people would feed you. You have a whole extended family. I'm talking about Tibet in the old days, you know, when these masters were growing up. It's a completely different thing to our Western cut-off working mothers, professional people who don't really have time for their children and stuff like that. I don't know, Kerry, if you want to say anything on that, maybe, from your experience.
Right now.
You don't, okay. No, but
Mel,
yes, please.
I have two thoughts. So I think for me, in my personal experience,
Right.
because and that's what I like about your lessons, by the way, because you always challenge people to talk from a personal experience perspective, not from the logical. So I think we as Buddhists are very good at overthinking and getting into the studies, but we sometimes don't like the feeling part of the teachings.
Exactly.
So when the Buddhism started to work for me was because when, like you said, when you join, you usually have a life stressor or something that brings you to the path. And then usually you're trying to move away from that thing. And then the first approach is to suppress, like you said. I'm only going to do the Buddhism. I'm only going to do that. I'm going to be the model Buddhist, and I'm going to be teacher's pet and all that kind of stuff. So, and then you do that, and then that doesn't quite work because your dark side trips you up.
Exactly.
Then you go the opposite direction. So now you say, okay, so the first one is you suppress, that doesn't work, then you become the ultimate Buddhist, and then that doesn't work as well because you're not sitting with your dark side either.
Yeah.
The best fit, when Buddhism really started to work for me is when I brought my demons to sit and meditate with me.
Good.
And the why Buddhism and meditation, like you said, people do the pujas, they do the books, they do the podcast, they go and watch YouTube, everything but meditate. Because, like I heard a nice thing on Instagram, the guy said, meditating is putting your demon on stage with a microphone. It's like, it's a lot, like if you're trying to run away from your demon, it's the last thing you want to do because you're putting it right front and center in front of you.
And you hit the nail on the head because a lot of people don't do their practice because the demons arise when you're doing your practice.
Exactly. So, but the thing is, I think we're so hard on ourselves as Buddhists to be perfect. And then when we meditate, it's like, oh, I can't be this because I have to be that. And the best thing is just actually to sit there and feel compassion for yourself dealing with this stuff tripping you off.
But you,
and dissolve it into the light, dissolve it into the healing energy.
But I'm trying to get something else across tonight.
Okay.
What you're saying is 100% true. And if you hear my previous two sessions, you'll see what I was, you should go back and have a look at them because there's a lot of stuff there. But what I'm trying to say is that the dark parts of you are not really dark. If you see them with pristine,
it's an aspect. It's an aspect.
So it's very important not only to deal with, not only to let the demon come up and have compassion, but to know that that demon isn't true. We just feel as though it is. We've given it power. We've done everything. You see, James Lowe really, really gives a lot of stuff here, because he says, when you do Buddhist, when you do, say you do Chenrezi practice, like we did tonight, you do the practice, and what the practice is about is stepping outside yourself and becoming something else. And if you get the idea, if I step outside of Melanie, stepping out of Melanie, and I'm now Tara, or I'm now Chenrezi, or I'm now Guru Rinpoche, okay, I could see that there are many options. It's not only the dark little girl that got punished and victimized and had troubles and did this wrong in her life and did that wrong. I can actually play the role of many, many other things. And he says, the Tantra at its root is about ecstasy. And he says, ecstasy comes from ekstasis, a stepping out of yourself.
Yeah.
When you suddenly realize that it's not only me, but I have infinite potential, infinite possibility. I can be any of these beings when I'm doing it, but we don't do it seriously. Okay. And also he says, which is interesting, he says, when you meet somebody you haven't met before, okay, you ask things like, where are you from? What do you do? How many siblings have you got? Are you married? How many children? You ask all those questions. Now, what I found fascinating is that none of these masters ask you those questions when they meet you. They never say, are you married? How many children have you got? We tell them about all our lives, but they never ask you. Now, have any of you ever thought why they never ask you the usual question? They don't ask you anything because we've got a life constructed out of our stories, what we've made up, our projections, our storylines, our everything. We've got a life made up. They don't care very much about that life. Of course, they care if you're okay. But as he said, as he said, the guru has to open a new kind of experience. So the guru won't ask you, how old are you? Where do you live? Have you got a husband? Do you have children? What do you do for a living? They don't ask you any of those questions. That's what's so strange, you know. They don't ask you those questions, but they will ask you, what spiritual practice do you do? They'll ask you all the Buddhist questions that they need to know, but they won't be interested really in what you do in your life. Because, I mean, Talopa was a pimp at night. He went and he took men to prostitutes. That was his job at night. He was this great lineage master. And in the day, he ground sesame seeds. And why does he present himself like that? He presents himself like that. He was one of the greatest masters. When Naropa met him, he was fishing. And then he took the fish, fried it, and ate it in front of Naropa. And Naropa said, you are the master I've come to see. And you're killing fish. And you're eating them. I don't understand. So he said, okay. He brought the fish up, he brought it back to life, and he put it back in the water, because it was all he was doing by eating the fish was giving the fish a momentum. He wasn't doing what we would do if we went fishing and if we cooked a fish. So they see it from a completely different view. They see your potential. They see who you really are. They don't ask those questions about our storyline. So tonight I'm trying to say, if you step out of yourself a little bit, then you can go to that perfect picture which wants to know. And from that basis, you can do some of the practices which I'll talk about. But Rob Priest said when he was doing his Nandra practice, he would have really appreciated somebody who knew the psychology of what was coming up. He said he was really wondering how he could go on the how he could go on this Buddhist journey when he felt so many things. And he said that's why he had to bring Jung into it, because Jung spoke about the individual and about how they were. The Buddhist practice doesn't speak about that. We've got Akong Rinpoche giving us a way to go back because he sees that we are all stuck with it. But I want you to begin to understand next week how we can do this transformation, how we can step back and see ourselves as a whole, looking at that picture and how our dark sides are really energy. That's all they are. And if we use that energy, it's amazing. And then to use the other thing that James Lowe said, I told you that his guru said, what the trouble with all of you is, you go on and on and on and on about things. You never know how to drop things. You never know how to end things. If you're having a fight, you go on and on and on and on, making your point. Said, why can't we see things and then drop them? Just drop them afterwards, because we got to go up, pick them up, look at them again, reanalyze them, redo them, everything them. It's so important that you all understand this. So let's do a little meditation tonight, and we'll do a little bit of shamatha and a little bit of vipassana. And then that's enough for tonight, because a lot of people aren't here tonight and they'll have to listen to this. So let's just do a little meditation, everybody. I'm going to just silence you all, because otherwise we have the noise. Okay. So I want you first to come into your meditative position and sit in a beautiful place and be right here, present. Not only present, but absolutely aware, totally and utterly aware. You're aware you're sitting in a group. You're aware we're all meditating. You're aware you've got dark sides. You're aware that this is a present moment, but it's a moment of being totally aware. You're aware of it all. And as you're breathing in, I want you to breathe in the spaciousness of this huge nature, like the sky, blue, open, spacious, completely having space for everything, the light, the dark, everything. And the past is gone, and the future hasn't been made, and we are here in this moment. And Rob Priest says, we distort our understanding of Buddhism to suit our personal inclinations. And this is often done in order to maintain and justify our habits and beliefs that secure a familiar sense of identity in the world. And Freud called this neurosis, a kind of a personal religion, that we've got all these hang-ups, all these scars, all these wounds, all these bereavements, all these pains, all these sufferings. We've got them all. I want you tonight to release them like you were releasing balloons into the sky. Just release everything as you take a deep breath. Feel the regeneration of your energy as you breathe out. Let it all go. Let it all be like balloons going up into the sky. You are here now. None of this is real. It's just the temporary, transient dramas of your life. Let them be like bubbles in the sky, like balloons. like mirages, like just echoes. Echoes come back, just let them be, let them out. And come to this present moment, calm, peaceful. Notice where your mind is. Notice where your body is. Wherever you feel even an ounce of tension, let it go like the balloons. Feel your neck, your shoulders, your mouth, your forehead, your hands, your feet. Just let them all relax in a peaceful shamatha, peace abiding. Everything, let it be. Now it takes time for the Eastern teachers even to begin to understand the kind of life that we lead in the West and the nature of our pressures, our insecurities, and all our stresses that affect us. I want you in your Vipassana to just allow one of your deep hang-ups, whatever hang-up you have, which you know is very deep. Maybe you react very badly to people. Maybe you intellectualize about everything. Maybe you get paranoid when you haven't done things perfectly. Maybe you get angry very quickly. Maybe you're always trying to please people. Maybe you're scared of yourself and that you don't feel good enough. Whatever your hang-up is, the biggest one, in this peaceful abode, I want you to let that dark shadow come up. Just come up. It's like you are looking. It's like you have this dream. And in this dream, you're always running from this monster. Okay? You're running and running to a safe place, and then you wake up from the dream. But this time, you're entering the dream and you're seeing the monster in front of you clearly. I want you to look at him very, very clearly. Maybe in your heart. Ask him what he needs from you and listen to his reply. Maybe he's the guy that prevents you from practicing. Maybe he's the guy that stops people from getting close to you. Maybe he's the person that makes you have rigid ideas. I want you to just encounter him in your Vipassana and know that he's just a dualistic solidifying of something. There's nothing really there. It's all part of the one. And ask, what do you need from me? How can we be friends? How can you stop tripping me up? How can you and I work together? Give him a chance to tell you and listen with great empathy. Maybe he's telling you he's always been scared since childhood. And he's really trying to protect you. And that's why he trips you up, because he doesn't want you to fail. And maybe you need to say to him, listen, we need to work together. We need to be able to fail sometimes. We need to stop planning and conniving in life and just allow it to be. Make a contact with him, her, it. Make a contact and see it for what it is. temporary, transient. Maybe the dark side is the part that protects you. Maybe it's time to awaken that Buddhism is not like is not like the approach of the Judeo-Christian values, where this is good and this is bad. Buddhism is much more open and amenable. Maybe if you can see these hang-ups and know them, then maybe you can make friends with them. If you talk to the demon, to the dark force, to the hang-up, you'll begin to learn exactly what it is that they are feeling. And then these psychological issues will not come up in your practice to trip you. Maybe there is something in you that is afraid of failing in your practice, that doesn't feel good enough. That's okay too. Doesn't matter if you don't have brilliant practice. The time when you sit alone like this is so important, because it's the time you actually begin to have a chance to see. And in your busy life, you never have a chance to see. You're just busy all the time. Zongsa Kienzi advises the people of Vancouver that he's teaching. He says, why don't you go on a long trip without a purpose? He says, like, take a trip to the north of Vancouver on a boat, on a train, on a car, on whatever you are, just to get there, maybe to blow your nose, and then leave your snot there and come back. So basically, for no purpose. I thought that was really beautiful, because maybe we are so busy with the purpose, we haven't stopped to see how whole we really are, how we were perfect to start off with. And maybe we need to just have some space without motives, without purpose, without planning, without plotting. Just a moment or two in your day, can be 5 minutes, just to be. What a relief. What a relief. Find that peace. Once you find the peace, you can find that wholeness. Once you find the wholeness, the knowing that needs to know, then you begin to see all your motives. They become exposed. And it's okay. None of us are these angelic forces. So it's okay if we're a bit deviant with this, or we're a bit deviant with that, or we don't like this, or we're bored with this practice. It's okay. Just not to have a purpose every minute of the day, just to be, so the purpose can reveal itself by itself. That's what we need time to do. Just one more sentence before we leave. Rob Priest says, considerable wisdom comes from our state of imperfection. Considerable wisdom comes from our state of imperfection. So I think we can end there. And I just want to say the one other thing that Rob Priest says in his introduction. He says, when we examine our personal pathology more closely, we may discover a way to be liberated from it. If we fail to do so, these unaddressed issues may color our spirituality and distort our understanding. So accept yourselves. None of us are perfect. None of us do perfect practice. None of us are perfect wives, husbands, partners, and everything. Be kind, but also know that that dark side has a lot that is protecting you in it. Don't be afraid of it. So let's dedicate. Fiona had to go, so I'll just give a little dedication, and then you can ask me if you want to ask me anything. So we're just saying, sorry, just want to find the English of it. Through the virtue of everything that we are talking about, may we all obtain omniscience and overcome all adversity, thereupon liberating all beings from this temporary drama of existence, which is rocked by the waves of birth, aging, sickness, and death. We really want to release all beings from this so they can be free to carry on. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe dranam pamshene jegana chibala dropaye sipe sole doa dro warsho.